everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the LGBT Alliance USA podcast. And we're here with a guest. Her name is Nevelyn. She is an artist, primarily in writing, dance, and the visual arts. And currently, she has a blog, which is her primary focus for her artistic output. And she has quite a story. It goes all the way far back to 2013, but also in the past few years as well. She's been sort of involved in the gender critical sphere, and she's here to talk about some of that, as well as perhaps her one of her more recent articles on her blog. So yeah, Nevelyn, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and explain how you first entered this whole gender war issue?
Hi, Ariane. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be able to collaborate with the LGBT Alliance again. My name is Nevlin. I'm, as you know, a multidisciplinary artist. Um, my background is in primarily writing, like memoir, essays, as well as film. I have a background in pole dancing as well and visual arts. I have a blog on Substack, which I started after I got canceled from social media, which I'll get into in a bit. My blog is my primary literary and media arts platform where I talk about how gender critical issues like such as trans ideology, gender ideology affects Black women, lesbians, detrans women, including myself. And I definitely draw on my own life and I write essays of different types, personal essays and sometimes scholarly essays as well. Um, so yeah, I how I got into the discussing gender ideology. Um, yeah, as you said, it goes back to 2013. So I was living in Brooklyn at the time, and I was a part of a couple of. I had just moved to New York, after school, and immediately I was drawn to Brooklyn because they have um, a very thriving community of lesbian women of color, Sapphic women of color, et cetera. So I immediately got involved with a couple of organizations. There was the Audre Lorde Project. There was Fierce, which was, as they say, for queer people of color. But back in the day, in the early 2000s, and like even like right on the border of the early 2010s, that was when like the term queer still meant that you're same-sex attracted, but it was starting to kind of like border on to what it is today, which is it means everything and nothing. So I got involved with those organizations just to find some community. And I saw some abuse happening in that community, as well as to someone who I was friends with. There was a man who called himself a woman and demanded everyone to use, female pronouns. And he was just a very large, strong man who made, not that this matters at all, but just to note that he made zero effort whatsoever to even try to like make people think that he looks like a woman. I mean, just even to path, like he just looked like a regular ass dude walking down the street, And so he came into that community, and he was abusing and manipulating a very young girl. I think we were friends at the time. I think she was like maybe 18 or 19, like barely legal. And it was a big deal. And I was really angry about that. And I saw some other things happening that I felt like were unfair, like the double standards, like women can't have our own spaces. It was a little bit politically incorrect during that time to still to have a women's space in that specific, in the LGBT community. But trans women can have their own spaces, and then they can have, they can go into any other space. They had this sort of like privileging within those spaces. And um, I took to YouTube because I already had a YouTube channel for a few years where I was, sharing my voice on different philosophical and, social commentary, political issues, and the like. So I made this video called Trans Women Are Not Female. And it was really, yeah, that was a whole experience. That was like one of my most viewed videos. It was very polarizing. There was a lot of people who really agreed with me, a lot of people who wanted to tear my channel down. There are people even to this day who have mirrored that video. I was just very fierce and no nonsense. And like my understanding about gender ideology back then was um, still formulating. It was like kind of rudimentary in a way. Like I wasn't like, a radical feminist or anything, or like I hadn't really done like really in-depth research on these issues the way that I have now. And I had looked some things up. I had done some research to try to understand what I was seeing, but it wasn't like um, my understanding of like I still believed in like the true trans ideology, which is the idea that some people are, that they're born trans, or that, they have a different, maybe they have a different brain, or, whatever. I still kind of believe that, but I knew that even so that shouldn't be reason for women to be infringed upon and abused in and for our identity to be disrespected. I mean, not that womanhood is not an identity anyway, but but I still believed in, women's rights. And so that's how it started back then. And it's interesting because like that video happened. I want to do a response to that video now, like soon, like within the next year or so on my platform. But after that happened, there was more. I did like follow-ups about it and everything. And then I went quiet for many years. Like I went quiet for like 8 years or so. And then in 2022, after I had had some experiences in the LGBT and queer communities, and I am using LGBT because literally, like, I was in those spaces, not LGB spaces. Um, I was having some experiences that were not sitting right with me, where I felt very marginalized as a woman. I felt like, we were being erased, and I didn't have the understanding of what was happening. I just saw it happening. I just felt it happening with like how we were placed at the bottom of like who is included in a space or not mentioned at all. Like women are not even mentioned, or like if we're in a women's space, like if this was a space that was spearheaded by a lesbian, like okay, there's like a let's have a space where we're all talking about our sexuality, and this is primarily for bisexual and lesbian women. And everyone, like, we're still doing pronoun circles, even though or there's a boy in there, there's like a young man in the circle, and like he's just there, like, and no one's saying anything, and like, stuff like that. I was seeing that. And then eventually, after a couple of years of research and trying to listen to different sides genuinely, I came to my own conclusions, and I learned about like how this is affecting, women in prison, and how males are identifying their way into women's prisons. And there's a lot of abuses happening in the world, that this is not just an intra community issue. This is actually like much bigger than that. And so in 2022, I came out with some posts on Instagram, started talking about these issues. And then that went on for about a year. And in 2023, in April, I started researching and sharing the stories of Black lesbian detransitioners. um, because no one else was doing it. I'm like, why is all the stories about detrans women are all lily white? You know, like there's no, and I have spoken to a Black lesbian woman who had a detrans experience, and she told me that like actually race was a part of my whole um, reasoning of why I transitioned. Like sometimes these issues are also impacting our experiences with gender ideology, and they need to be spoken for. And so I did some research, and I found several videos of women's firsthand experiences of them talking about their detrans experience, what happened, their healing journey, and all of that. And I started sharing them in my Instagram stories. And and actually people were picking it up and starting to talk about it, and it was circulating. I didn't say anything. All I said was, all I said was, I'm just sharing these stories because they're not being shared in the mainstream conversation about these issues. I didn't say anything else, didn't insult anybody. And then the next day my accounts were gone. Like all of my social media was gone. Every single Meta account that I ever had, everything I had for like the past 13 years was gone. And that's when I opened my Substack and started writing on Substack. So here I am, just a little bit over a year later, writing on Substack and growing on there. And honestly, it's been great. So that's my story, long story.
It's a long story, but it's a great story. Just sort of rewinding a bit to the beginning of the story, with the video you did, I guess that was in 2013. Before, like, just growing up, I'm just curious about what exposure, if anything, you had to sort of this queer or gender ideology growing up. Because I know for me, it was already there for me in the San Francisco Bay Area when I was in high school in like 2005. So I'm curious about, what your background with that was.
That's so interesting. No one's ever asked me that before. Really interesting. Actually, growing up, my first exposure to it was through my cousin. My cousin was actually trans. And I actually never even talk about this, so it's kind of cool that I get to talk about it now. So my cousin, like, and this is when I was like my early year, like years 0 to 7. So my sometimes like my cousin and uh, my aunt, her mother, would come to visit. And yeah, so when I was a child, I remember her as a lesbian, like she was like a butch lesbian. And then over time, she transitioned, went through the medical procedures and everything, took the hormones and everything, and became um, a trans man, or what we call in the gender critical world a trans identifying female, and totally pass as a man. And back then, when if you're a transgender man back in the day, like you really want to be a man. Like nowadays everyone's like, yeah, I'm a trans man, but I'm gonna wear pink lipstick and mini skirts, and like no one was trying to do that. Trying to confuse people. So anyway, yeah, that was my cousin, and it's interesting because like growing up, for me, like that side of my family that she was on is Latin American. So there was like this, like I guess cultural conservative attitudes towards it. I heard a lot of that, like conservative attitudes, like, oh, she just transitioned because she was trying to get back at her mother, and blah 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 blah. And who's to say? I don't know. I was pretty young. And the last time I saw her was when I was a teenager, and unfortunately, she died. Um, uh, Maybe when I was a late teen, so I didn't know her that well. But yeah, that was my early exposure to it. And otherwise, like growing up where I'm from, um, basically, the lesbian capital of America, like I didn't actually see I didn't actually see any. I don't remember seeing any trans people growing up. Actually, it's a very new phenomenon. I grew up seeing a lot of butch lesbians, a lot of lesbians, but not very many trans people. And then, like in school, I didn't see anyone who identified as trans until college. And I went to a lot of different schools, but I didn't really see that until college and like in the women's resource center specifically. Like it was so rare. It was so rare. And there was only one young woman who was transitioning to live and identify as a man, and that is it. This boom that's happened is very recent. That's all I can say. All the pronouns and everything, like all of that is just like it is very recent and very new. No matter how much people try to say, oh yeah, this has always been a no, it, it really hasn't.
It's interesting. I went to a women's college in this lesbianville town that you're talking about. People who are listening can probably figure out what we're talking about, but and this was it was class of 2011, so 2007 to 2011 time. There were definitely female students that were transitioning to being trans men, which was a phenomenon that intrigued me because I actually didn't. I had exposure to the male to female a little bit um, before then, but so seeing all the female to males were the trans identified females was an interesting thing to me, and I kind of got the sense around the time that was around the time Lesbianville was starting to veer increasingly queer. So
Yeah, yeah,
it's not
yeah.
not
But
to the extent as now, but
yeah, that's so interesting. Like I'm guessing that maybe we're from different generations. What year did you start to see that transition happening?
well, I graduated from college in 2011. And so I started, I guess, 2007, and I was seeing this transition going on then. It was also when I was there that they were starting to also use gender inclusive pronouns for like club charters and stuff to be
Hmm.
accommodating for trans men, trans identified female students. Um,
Hmm.
I should also say, growing up in the Bay Area already, even before then in high school, my high school gay straight alliance, the GSA, turned into gender and sexuality awareness. And there
Yeah,
was one boy who did trans then. So it was, this was like the early stages for me.
yeah, yeah. I can see that. I that now that I think about it, that was the earliest switch that I saw that I didn't understand what was happening, but I did see a lot of switching from Women's Resource Center to gender and sexuality, this, that, and the third. Whether
Mhm.
it's the center in the school, like a resource center where you can go and get like support, or of course the academic departments, switching that terminology and erasing like women from, um, or women were either erased from those terms or we're like kind of like it may be just an inclusion like gender sexuality and women's or something like that, or it's always women and something else. It's never just women. It's like it's women and femmes or women and non-binary or women with an asterisk or women, like just gender sexuality and women's, like it can never just be women. We can never be centered.
Yeah, that's
You
that's
know?
an that's an excellent point. And I think for me, when I encountered it, so much I wasn't so much concerned with it because I didn't realize how disastrous this would end up being. I thought it was just sort of like, okay, we're done with this whole women's lib thing. We can now bring in other issues, or we're, gay rights. We're about to be done. Like, let's just have other groups in too. And I didn't realize, no, that was, there was something else much scarier going on there.
Right.
Yeah, and it was good that you noted that some of the warning signs all the way back in 2013, because I think for a lot of people it wasn't so much later. Yeah, so then sort of going back, you going closer to present times, I'm curious about one comment you made about how you didn't think there was enough attention given to Black uh, detransitioners, Black women who had been detransitioners. That's an interesting point, something that I hadn't thought about, but now I'm like, wait, it does seem like most of the detransitioner narrative is white women. Do you have any thoughts as to why that is?
I mean, I mean, this is the world that we live in. It's, you know, white people are overrepresented in the media and in this, in like any sort of feminist discourse. Unless, you want to go into like, woke culture, I suppose. But even that is like, that's all from a it's all like ideologically white liberal, even if it has like a black face on it. But that's neither here nor there. I think that like it's just kind of like the classic, um yeah, like this is a conversation that's happening in the Western sphere. This is gender ideology, and transgender ideology is a Western Eurocentric phenomenon, right? That impacts people of color differently, and definitely does impact and is infiltrating our communities within the West. And, we definitely need to talk about like how it's uniquely impacting us, and how maybe in some ways it also like impacts us harder, because there's ways in which there's like still a lot of structural inequalities that are tied to race and class and all that stuff. um but like I feel like the first thing that comes to mind is just like it's like this white feminism, like that's I mean, the conversations tend to revolve around, white middle class women. And I think that there's a lot of, I guess, Black women are not really thought of. It's not an intentional exclusion. I actually want to write about, I want to write about how gender critical feminism is very white, and how that's how I've experienced it myself as a Black woman who, I don't really call myself a feminist necessarily, but like I do intersect and align with the gender critical feminist sphere on a lot of my values and issues. So, but I want to write about that more in depth. But it's basically just like a reflection of the society that we live in. And at the same time, I do feel like there needs to be some accountability, because I think that if you live in America and you're talking about women and how this affects women and women and women, then you need to, actually like accurately like think about how this is affecting women as a group, which includes a certain percentage of minority, like racial minorities, right? So white people are disproportionately represented in the conversation that actually should, include people with different racialized experiences. And it does matter, because it is different. We're not just like white people with a tan.
Right. No, I think that's an important thing to discuss, and I'm glad you're gonna be writing more about that. I and my own experience, I'm very involved in Buddhism, and and most, Western converts to Buddhism are white, and they are usually pretty woke. You could say, like, including on the gender related, transgender related topics, and they don't really have a good understanding of how these things are actually expressed within Asia and within Asian Buddhism. And more recently, I met someone who was actually a Thai Buddhist lesbian who was trying to explain how, like, transgender in Thailand means something completely different than
Yeah,
it does
it
in the West.
it
Yeah,
does.
and just this miscommunication and misunderstanding by a lot of, white Western Buddhists who just like don't get it. So I can totally see like that would also be the case with sort of not paying attention to what a Black woman's perspective would be on gender critical issues too.
Yeah, it's just like I think when you're so used to whiteness being the default and that's like you're centered everywhere, I think that like unless you I don't know, maybe have had like certain life experience that's made you see wider than that, you're not like it's going to feel acceptable for your entire platform to be completely dominated by white voices, even if that doesn't even represent the people that you're actually trying to advocate for. It's just going to feel it's it's a lack of consciousness there. And I like the point that you brought up about the how transgenderism is different in Thailand. I know that they have lady boys, you know, and that's like that's very it's a lot more culturally accepted there. I won't say that it's completely accepted. I don't know that to be true, but like um, the way that's another thing that why I wanted to start talking about and what when I started talking about these issues on Instagram back in 2022, one of the posts that I made was about how trans ideology is very colonial and how they are pushing it and projecting it onto people of other races and force teaming people of other races and cultures in the global south, and they're trying to appropriate these cultures and take it and say, well, this is transgenderism, and they're taking like they're taking these other cultures and the way that they handle gender a little bit differently, in ways that to in a Eurocentric context would look to be gender nonconforming, or that looks like role reversal. And it's like you're still projecting your Eurocentric lens onto these other cultures, and you're saying, well, that's queer. Like that's queer, and you're saying, well, they're trans. And it's like, no, there's no such thing as trans in like transgender is a completely Eurocentric construction, invention. And that's where it exists. Everyone else is doing their own thing. You can't just take that and say, well, this is an example of that, because it's not. And usually they distort it too. They don't actually say what the thing actually is, like two spirit. It's like that's not like lady boys, like a lot of them don't even they're not walking around necessarily saying, no, we're the same as women. They're like, no, I'm a lady boy.
Oh, that was something that was, made clear to me by this person I know from Thailand. They don't think that they're literally women, and that then the female equivalent, the Toms, aren't literally men. And there's also a whole spiritual angle to it in Thailand specifically that gets wrapped up with like belief in karma, like if you were
Mhm.
male in a past life and now you're reincarnated as a female, how that can affect your your, what we would call gender expression or even sexual orientation. So, and a lot of this is just lost.
Mhm.
You try to translate it for the Western culture. Yeah, and I think the point too, I mean, this sort of segues nicely into your article on your blog about Pauli Murray, um, who was, well, you can give a more of an introduction. Well, why don't I just let you introduce the character and the discussion in the article?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wrote a very in-depth essay called How the Trans Movement is Erasing Black Women from History, Setting the Record Straight About Pauli Murray. And for those who don't know, Pauli Murray was a very significant historical figure, Black female activist, writer, poet, Episcopal priest, legal scholar, a woman of many, many professional, scholarly, and artistic achievements throughout her life in the early 20th century. So this was, she was born in 19, the 1920s. I have to check. I think she was most active in in the 1920s through the 19 through her death in 1985, and yeah, she was a what we would what we would look at. She was masculine presenting. She was a homosexual woman. These are her words. So she was a lesbian, and I decided to write about her because I came across a blog post last fall in 2023, and I saw that there was a woman who the writer of this blog post identifies as non-binary, they them, but um, she was a woman, a female writer, talking about Pauli Murray and this new film, this new documentary that came out about Pauli Murray, talking about her life and legacy. And she was saying that, we this is honoring our non-binary queer ancestors. And I was like, what? Like, what? You know, and I knew that that was incorrect automatically because there was no such thing as transgender back in Pauli Murray's time. This is a very new word and a new concept. Um, even the term transsexual came about like, maybe halfway through Pauli Murray's life. And so I knew that was incorrect, and I just did a quick Google search, and I found like all of these major institutions now repopularizing Pauli Murray, right? Because a lot of people don't really know about Pauli Murray. Like if I say, oh, this was about Rosa Parks or Martin Luther King, I don't have to introduce who that is, right? But I introduced Pauli Murray because I know a lot of people don't know about her. But now a lot more people are learning about her because she's being rebranded by all of these major institutions and museums and nonprofit organizations who are, stewards of, representing her history to the world. She's being rebranded as a transgender man and non-binary and the zir and the he her and this that, and changing her pronouns posthumously. And so I was like, what are they doing? And I had to get to the bottom of it. So I took a trip to Harvard Library. She has all of her archives, all of her medical records, all of her diaries and notes and, you know, letter, everything stored at the Harvard Schlesinger Library, which ironically is a women's history library. And and she was like, I want this stored at the Schlesinger Library. And I realized that they were taking some of her medical records. They weren't clear about what they were doing, but they had found something in her medical records that indicated that she identified as a man and that she was actually transgender. And I was like, that can't be right. What is going on? And so I went there and I looked through all her records, I looked through all her medical records and everything. And she did indeed, um, I discovered that she did indeed at some point in her life seek out um, testosterone. Now, the context of that is different than today because now testosterone is so readily available. She saw a newspaper clipping that by the way is in the essay. I have photos and the newspaper clippings and I have clippings from her medical records literally embedded in the essay so everyone can just see, because nobody wants to show what was actually written by her and what she was actually collecting. They all just want to twist and say, oh no, she was actually just she actually said this and she did this, but she found a newspaper clipping that was advertising a testosterone as a experimental hormone therapy for gay, effeminate men to turn them into um, real men, virile, straight, heterosexual men. This was actually just for males. This was a trial run. It seemed to be working. They were not abashed. They were not shy that this was conversion therapy. Like they were not trying to be shy about that because it wasn't politically incorrect to say that. And Polly collected that and she said, wow, like I have these feelings for women, I'm masculine. I like dressing in men's clothes and maybe I'm actually, male. She thought that she may have been biologically male, like actually biologically male. So she thought that she might be as she put it, a hermaphrodite, or she thought that she might actually have like undescended testes. This was all completely a biological thing, which is different because it's like uh, actually transgenderism is not has nothing to do with biology. It has everything to do with your identity and nothing to do with biology. That's not part of the conversation. So yeah, I discovered that and I wrote about it and I wanted to expose what was happening and just set the record straight about her that actually if you look at all of the issues that she pointed out as to why she is seeking out this therapy, this testosterone therapy, um, they were all about being a lesbian and being wanting to dress like the way that she normally saw men dress. That's it.
Yeah, I was first of all, I learned a lot just sort of on the background of like testosterone as a quote unquote treatment, the idea that they were like using it to treat feminine gay men, or did they specifically say gay men, or was it just feminine men in general that they were advertising it for?
They said effeminate. I would have to look at it again. I haven't read that essay in a few weeks, but um, it was yes, gay. Like I remember them, and they used the words conversion therapy. So it was for effeminate gay males, and they said this is new conversion therapy, and it's effective.
And yeah, and that's one thing too that it seems to be missing from, these attempts to try to, posthumously trans her was the context of the of what these therapies were supposed to be doing at the time. It wasn't it's not there was nothing progressive about that, really. And like what you said too about how she was focused on the biology, like she actually tried rooting her, any potential masculinity as being something that like maybe she was in her, maybe you could do some tests to find it in the body.
So,
That was something that was interesting to me and kind of reflects on how like disembodied we've become in modern society, that we think we can just have a self-identity that overrides that.
yeah,
It's an interesting sociological phenomenon. And one thing I thought was kind of sad reading the article, and you sort of touched on this, but the fact you concluded by bringing up how, like until recently, not a whole lot of people knew about her from just the general public, and now she's famous now because she can be appropriated as a trans icon. What's wrong with just celebrating her as being like a black women icon, or a black lesbian icon? Why were those narratives not important enough?
right,
But the
right,
trans narrative that speaks volumes about sort of modern culture and the priorities of our modern society.
exactly, exactly, and yeah, that was very sad for me too. Um, and it's It's true. It's just like that. That's just that's unfortunately what's going on. It's like in order to offer her, any sort of legitimacy, and you have to dig her up and reframe her as a man, and kind of like, yeah, erase her womanhood. Although, I will also say again, like at the end of her life, and really that whole pushing for testosterone therapy happened in the span of like 5 years in her late 20s, early 30s, and then it stopped. And she eventually found a lot of peace in her womanhood, and just through finding community, and relating to other same-sex attracted women. And she had a life partner, you know um, and I think that she became more comfortable in her skin as a lesbian, even though uh, she never like did this coming out thing. I mean, uh, uh, why should we expect her to necessarily? I mean, she died in 1985. It wasn't like, there were a lot of women. It's not like it was like it is today. Um, so she didn't have to, but it's like when she wrote a memoir, it got published posthumously, and she identified herself as a woman, and she was a proud feminist, and people want to erase that completely.
Yeah, and I think that also, I'm kudos to you, by the way, for actually going to like this thing called a library. Lots of young people don't know maybe what I know. I'm just
I
kidding.
love
But
library.
for actually actually being like a historian, not just a writer, but actually looking at some of these records, because I sometimes fear like a lot of history, women's history, or gay lesbian history could very well be entirely rewritten if we're not careful about actually, preserving these old records on what people were actually thinking and saying. Well, I was just going to ask if you had plans. Are there other sort of historical figures that you're intrigued by, that you had any plans on doing research on,
Yeah,
or
that's a great question. So I do want to mention, because yeah, I didn't say this before, but so which my background in films goes way back, like maybe like 15 years. Um, and I went to school for film, and I also published a major feature length documentary. It's called Reflections on Hurt Black Women and Civil Rights. Um, and so that was actually my first major research project, like research and artistic projects, scholarly work that I did in this same vein. So actually working on the Pauli Murray essay felt a lot like working on Reflections Unheard. And I hadn't done any work like that for like 10 years, because I'd been like out here like writing memoir and doing pole dancing, and like just being really vulnerable about myself and my own work, which I still very much am. But like it felt a lot like that. So that is a vein of my work, is like I love reading about Black women's history, Black lesbian history, um, and that documentary. By the way, if people want to see it, it's in a lot of libraries. You can search for it on worldcat.org, and it's in a lot of academic libraries, and it's in some public libraries. And if it's not, then you can always request it. But but yeah, I did that film, um and so yeah, I knew that that was my forte, and I was like very well equipped to do this essay. And so the next thing that I am interested in, like I'm really interested in like Black lesbian history now. um I So when I did an audio version of the Pauli Murray essay as well, so that it's also available in a podcast format. And while I was doing that, I actually started to research like Black lesbian songstresses, like music from Pauli Murray's times, to include it in the podcast. So that podcast has some music from Black lesbians of the 1930s through the 1920s through the 1940s, who were singing about their experiences as Black lesbians, which is rare and very bold. But I got a couple of songs in there. And one of the women in there, um, her name is slipping me right now. She's not a very popular figure, and she had two names, and I'm forgetting them right now, but they're listed in the podcast. Um, she she actually also tried hormone therapy, and she had an article that came out in Essence magazine, which is, you know, a major black women's magazine. Still is, but Essence magazine, she had an article that came out in the 50s, like, I'm a woman now. And she talked about how she you know, went through the, like, she did hormone conversion therapy, and now it's changed her, and she's no longer homosexual. So I wanted to actually look into that more and see what happened there, because I had never heard of it until I really researched her music. And in general, like, there's a lot of archives that are in different schools. Like, I know that, like, there's, like, in Yale University, and just like a lot of these libraries and schools have, like, old, like, newsletters and magazines and zines and all sorts of publications from the 1980s through the 90s, when it was actually that window of time, like a glimmer of time in the world, in the Western world, where it was actually okay to be openly lesbian, and where women were allowed to have caucuses and groups and all sorts of things, and newsletters where you could actually say that you're a lesbian, right? Um, I really want to research more of that stuff, and I want to talk about it on my blog. And um, personally, on a personal note, like, I'm finding a lot of comfort reading Black lesbian anthologies, just as, like, nighttime reading. Um, like, I cannot read, like, modern day, um, like, LGBT or, like, queer or anything, like, queer women's, like, I just can't, it doesn't put me at, it doesn't really, it's not soothing, it's not enjoyable for me to read something that it's like, okay, I can sort of relate to this, but then I have to read through all this, like, this language, like cis het, uh blah blah blah, cisgender, da da da, and they, that, they, them, this, and I just, I can't. It's not enjoyable, and it stresses me out, because it's like I have to deal with all that stuff on a day to day basis anyway. Like, a lot of people they them me, like, a lot of people they me. I don't want to go home and read that before bed, you know, in like a space where I'm trying to relax. And all of the books are like that. Every single one that is being published today, especially ones that are, like, you know, getting popularity enough, like visibility, they're all like that. So, like, except for mine, because I write my own stories, but but I have started to, like, dig up, like, old Black lesbian anthologies with, like, a plethora of stories, true stories and fiction. I love the true stories of you know, and I want to do, like, a book list on my blog too, of, like, what I'm reading too, um, from the 90s and 80s. And that there's a sweet spot there where we can actually be frank about what's going on, and there's no bullshit. I love that. So that's what I'm doing for my own personal nourishment.
Well, that sounds like some amazing stuff that you're doing, and I totally get what you're saying about how this, you know, all this cisgender, they, theming, LGBTQ plus XYZ language can get so so irritating. Even when I try to ignore it and, like, okay, this article makes some perfectly good points. I just need to get past the language. It's still very much a distraction, and people who write that way either just, they just don't know or care, how many people are irritated by that. But I'm really intrigued that was it it was that that black woman lesbian musician who claimed that she was cured of homosexuality from testosterone. I really want to know more about that story. That sounds so weird. Do you know whether it was like she thought she was cured because she like actually thought like she was no longer sexually attracted to women, but instead to men, or she was cured in the sense that now she's a man and hence she's heterosexual?
Yeah, good question. No, she the article name is "I'm a woman now. I'm a real woman now." Something like that. So she was like, "I am a real woman. I am no longer lesbian. I no longer participate in lesbian activities, lifestyle, desires, whatever." I have to really look into it. I just saw the article itself and I skimmed over it, and that was like 2 months ago, or like in early April. And so I really want to do more research on that, because not a lot of people really know about her. And the people who, the way that I found that article was through like, I just found it hanging out on like some obscure, like, I guess the non-binary identified woman's blog. So it's like they're not really going to have that analysis, like a strong analysis to give about something like this. Like it's always going to be like either wishy-washy, or it's going to have that sort of language. And like honestly, yeah, I'm also intrigued by it, but I need to do my reading. I want to take a trip to like yeah, like there's the Lesbian Her Story archives, and there's just a bunch of libraries that I love. Libraries, by the way, they're my second home.
That's
I
great.
feel home in libraries. Yeah.
Well, it's also a problem because sometimes libraries are weird. I mean, it depends on the case, but I have heard some horror stories about libraries that um won't have certain books, even, like, and it seems to be like they're deliberately repressing it. Although surprisingly, here in the San Francisco Bay Area, I've had some decent experiences with the selection at the library. So it sounds like it's very hit or miss. But it's great that you're spending so much time doing this research.
Well, what I find is that in terms of like modern books that are not like, if gosh, like in terms of like if like history, if you're looking at archives and like radical feminism, and like just women with a Y, like women spelled with a Y, and woman with a womb, like all of that stuff is acceptable to have in the library because it's history, right? So
Mhm.
like that, it's like they'll have like entire exhibits like, yes, like this was feminism, this was lesbian feminism, like this was black lesbian feminism, and this is what they said. And like they are, it's acceptable to have it because it's history and people feel safe. It's like people like liberals, like woke liberals, whatever, they feel safe because this was, you know I don't know what it is, but like even with my film, it's like my film is unabashedly about Black women. Um, there's no like, oh, what about like the trans women? Although I did get one, there was, when I did a film screening in London in 2014, there was this one angry Black woman of all people who was like, why didn't you, what about the trans women, like why didn't you include trans women, why didn't you interview, and I'm just that like. And so, but generally speaking, I've showed like the film has is very popular, even like in like, the woke, it's very like infiltrated into the library system. And it has nothing, it's just like, this is just about women, this is about Black Panthers and stuff like that. So I don't know what it is. but like people almost like they don't hold me to this standard of like you have to include men. You
Mhm.
have to include trans this and that and gender ideology and this and that. um I don't know, but some people have asked me about like lesbian representation. I'm like, people just were not as open to talk about these things as we are today.
Mhm.
Anyway, but
Yeah, I think that's a good point. The archives might be less captured, for lack of better term, than the
well, they're
more.
captured. They are captured, but they are like they will still house historical material.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But new material, that's like if they're
yeah, yeah, yeah. They can sort of grandfather in the whatever you want to call it, the old school gay and lesbian history stuff.
the
Yeah,
old, yes, they
yeah,
consider school stuff.
right. So
Yeah.
I'm curious too. You have collaborated with LGB Alliance before, with the House of Isis
Yes.
project. Is that something you might want to get involved in again going into the future?
Yeah. So I did the Sapphic Women of Color space for lesbian and bisexual women of color last year in 2023. I intended for it to just last for 1 month, but it ended up lasting for 3 months. And I couldn't sustain it at the time, but it was really great and really successful for what it was. Uh, yeah, we had a full house, and I'm still connected with a lot of the women who I shared space with. And we just had great conversation. I really felt like that space was needed, and I definitely want to have more spaces like that, especially like for Black women or Black Sapphic women, Black women who love women in general. It's like who are gender critical. Like we need to have our spaces. There's anytime there's we want to find like a gender critical space. It's like sometimes it just feels like it's like for me personally, I'm going to speak for myself. I feel like I have to choose a lot of the time. It's like if I want to go into a gender critical space, like specifically, like where I know that people are like aware of certain issues and like have like the space to talk about them and how it affects them, not just conservative, not culturally conservative, which is most of the world, right? Like Africa and all that stuff. Like that's easy to find, but like gender critical, that's very white. And
Mm.
if I want to find like what they're calling now like BIPOC, if I want like a BIPOC space, like that's woke. Even the term BIPOC is like from, that kind of culture. It's kind of like a newish term, but like if I want to find that, then there I can expect that we're going to be doing the pronoun circles and all that stuff. So like um I feel like it's been really important for me as, one of the few Black women that I know who is, willing and able to speak about these issues openly, to be able to carve out spaces for us. And I want to do that with my blog. Actually, just today, I was even, I want to do like in person stuff for us. Like that's like like more exclude that those would be like really exclusive. Pretty much like a lot of my spaces are like, even though Sapphic Women of Color space was exclusive, it's like we have to like vet the people and everything. But um I definitely feel like community is so important for us because it's very isolating
Mm.
otherwise, very very isolating, and even more so for a lot of us who are seeking to have that community with other women who look like us. So yeah, I don't know, maybe, yeah, maybe there could be something down the line with LGB Alliance, but regardless, I definitely want to do something with my blog or through the people who are subscribed to my in conjunction with my subscribers and my readers. And then with House of Isis, I eventually do want to begin to offer like, workshops in like women's spaces. Like House of Isis is, a women's wellness brand. And like a lot of the focus there was like movement and health and wellness and like offering like sensual dance and like pole dancing and things like that. And so I definitely want to begin to integrate that into my offerings in the future. Not right now, but eventually, yeah.
That's great. And I see this is one way to put it, that sometimes being exclusive is actually more inclusive.
Yes.
Because, when you have, when you have the big tent and you say like anyone can identify in as queer or whatever, what ends up happening is that certain demographics, often women, often like lesbians, tend to just their voice becomes completely drowned out. And so it's not doesn't feel inclusive to us. And likewise, like what you're saying, like when you have, you just have something like a gender critical space, it may very well be the case it's going to become dominated by the predominant culture, like white, maybe particularly educated. I don't know, like I think there might be a class element there too. And having something like just a women of color space or just a Black women's space or whatever, it's exclusive, yes, but you're actually trying to include these voices that, otherwise would have been marginalized or ignored. So this
Yeah.
whole, yeah.
And I want to have some spaces um that are just for us, that are like, more like intimate, and like the Sapphic Women of Color space was a very like intimate space, and like that's also like how I envision like the in-person spaces. But I also want to have, to platform our voices as well. So I want to have like, I was thinking of having like a discussion about one of my articles. Like I wrote an article about how about Janelle Monáe's non-binary identity. Um,
So
yeah,
yeah.
did you read that one, by the way?
I don't think I know. I didn't read your article. I know about the brouhaha about the thing. Because didn't she sort of like identify as non-binary, but then she just said, well, she kind of wants to be known as a female artist or a woman artist. And so she's like, there was something about like, she wanted to have her cake and eat it too, kind
Yes.
of sort of
Yes.
thing.
I didn't know about that. I wrote this article in the fall of last year, like in maybe September, October, and then I didn't look into it after that. And
Mhm.
she's always changing, and we're always like on this evolutionary process, whatever. So I don't know, maybe I mean, I expect that from a non-binary identifying individual, especially a woman. It's like I expect that to change over time, because this is not like that is it's not stable, it's not sustainable, and it's not real. So it's just like uh, uh, if you come to your senses, you're going to like see things for what they are, basically. But I wouldn't be surprised if she did say that. A lot of non-binary females, a lot of non-binary women, non-binary identifying women love to have their cake and eat it too. I mean, a lot of like, that, it's it's funny even how like that whole label, and I feel like I'm digressing, but just bear with me for a second. Like they love to have like the I'm a non what do they say? I'm a trans non-binary, or I'm a um I'm a they them and a she her, or I'm a black woman and I'm not I'm a black woman and I use they them only pronoun, like only they them. And it's just like they just want to do it all, and it's really like you can do that in your tiny little social circle where everyone's going to enable you, but that's not real life, and that's not that's it. And it's not even just to say of like, oh yeah, like the world is against you, ma, and that's why they won't vote. No, no, it's actually not reality though. And like this is it's minutia, really. It's not it's minutia, it's confusion. um and that's what I saw with Janelle. Like it's crazy because it's like she's so like, I really resonate with so much of what she says, and I really respect her as like she's a very talented woman, very highly brilliant. And it's just such a shame that I see so many brilliant, beautiful, talented women like going down the drain with this one thing. And it's like that it's being inconsistent with a lot of the other things that they're saying, you know um it's inconsistency for me. So I wanted to have a conversation about that with in community with Black women, and I want to platform that so that everyone can be able to watch. Well, I think I may just make that available for my paid subscribers, but there are other conversations that I want to have in connection with either one other Black woman or in community with Black women that I want to be able to present to the public, and make it available for everyone to watch and learn from our voices. But I'm very clear that I want to center our voices on my platform. That's very important to me. So,
Mhm. And I appreciate that point you made too about how often it's like, I mean, Janelle Monáe, I think of being as very quirky. I mean, that's what I like her. I don't normally like actually modern pop artists, but I like her because she's just so much more interesting, and she's almost like what happens if you take a nerd or a geek and make them into a performance pop artist. And it's kind of sad that people feel like sometimes it's like they feel like the quirky ones have to be the ones that take this whole non-binary stuff seriously. It's like, why?
yeah, I get it. And I'm quirky too.
Yeah.
Quirky.
Same.
I'm an artist. I'm like I'm an artist to my bones, like that's who I am. Like, and I learned that about myself. Like I go through different mediums. It's like every like just mediums of expression, but like really what's at the core is like my creativity. And like also there's been an element of like outcasting in my life that's been a consistent theme, like outcasting, being different, being odd, and not even in this like emo kind of way, but literally just like it's happened without me really even wanting it to happen. It's happened even when I have tried to fit in into certain spaces, and I've learned to own that, and take that as like my power. And so I really understand, on some level, I really understand that element that I see in her. Like I see a lot of myself reflected in these artists as well, who are taking on these weird Eurocentric, honestly, like thinking that it's like Black power, but it's really not. Like, it's really the whitest, like most Eurocentric thing ever, but you're claiming it as like this liberation from white supremacy. And I'm like, no, this is literally the definition of like colonialism and misogyny. It's really weird. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Just,
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you have a lot of great ideas, and you've already done a lot of great work, and I'm looking forward to see what else you do. I'm just curious, before we wrap up this conversation, is there anything else you would like to share?
um, not that I could think of. This is it ever since, I really started my essay and the process of creating it and then releasing it. It's just been like a really great wave of being able to connect with new people and talk about like have conversations like this. Like I really enjoyed having this conversation with you. It's been really lovely, and yeah, just very creatively and intellectually stimulating and inspiring. And so I don't really have anything else to add. I just appreciate sharing this with you and your audience. And yeah, I come over, subscribe to my blog for sure. Don't try to follow me on social media, please. Like I see some people trying to follow me on Instagram. Don't do that. Like I use Instagram as kind of like a lurking account, and sometimes I might like share a little, but like not really. Subscribe to my blog, read my blog, connect with me there. And I'm also on Substack social media. So you can follow me if you have the Substack app, you can follow me there. That's my only social media right now, at Nevlyn, the artist way, the N3VLYNNN. That's like my brand, my website, everything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. I also really enjoyed this conversation. And so thank you for coming on, and we'll include links to all those various things that you've mentioned in our description for the viewers to check out. So thank you, and goodbye, everyone. Good night, good morning, whatever time of day it is.
Peace.